day's a day, a bad luck's always a coming my way.
Out of all of the beautiful homes here in LA, I think this one has to be my favorite. I don't think she lives here anymore, but this is where Kat Von D and her family lived. I think they sold it relatively recently and then moved across country to snow country. Someday, Jessica and I would absolutely love to own a home here in LA. And I think this has to be it. And you know what? I wouldn't change a single thing about it. I'd take it just as is. Supposedly, it even has a red swimming pool. I mean, come on, look at that. Even through the front gate, it's beautiful. Today's Grimm adventure is not about Kat Von D or our possible future dream house here in LA. Instead, we're gonna take the time and tell the story of one of the most famous pinups in history. Before we leave, here's one more look at this beautiful home. I mean, come on. You can't tell me that this wouldn't make a great Grimm Life Collective headquarters here in LA. The first stop on our Bettie Page adventure brings us to Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park and Mortuary, where the queen of pinups, Bettie Page, is buried. This is where her final resting place is. We've been here multiple times in the past, doing videos. And every time I come here, I stop and pay my respects, but this is the first time that we're here and showing her. Bettie Page died December 11th, 2008, after having a heart attack and then falling into a coma and never waking up. I also read that, I guess it was complications of pneumonia. Now, whenever you hear the name Bettie Page, just like Elvis or Marilyn or James Dean, her name is iconic. Her pictures are iconic, and the life that she has lived is just absolutely beyond anything that you can make up in Hollywood. There was a movie that came out called The Notorious Bettie Page, where it stars Gretchen Mol, who played Bettie Page. And of course, it came out whenever Bettie was still alive. And she saw it and she said that Gretchen Mol was more beautiful than Bettie ever was in her lifetime in all the different photos that she's ever taken. The only thing that she didn't like about the movie was that they used the word notorious. She hated the word notorious. She hated having that name in relation to her life. She said her life was not notorious in any way, shape, or form. Even though it's not a very big cemetery, it's easy to get lost in here. You could spend an entire day searching for famous graves, a little thing we like to call cemetery safari. And the water is quite nice. And Bettie's final resting place is pretty much right over there, about that center of your screen where that giant tree is. And there she is, the final resting place of the Queen of Pinups, Bettie May Page, born April 22nd, 1923, and died December 11th, 2008. During the funeral for Bettie Page, there was a photo that was taken It's absolutely amazing to see. It's of burlesque superstars Tempest Storm, Gloria Paul, and Dixie Evans. To make this even crazier, here's a picture, like a side-by-side comparison of how they used to look back in the day whenever they were performing to how they look at the time of Bettie Page's death. When it comes to telling the story of the life and career of Bettie Page, there's just way too much. So let's start in the 1950s. Basically, Bettie was working as a secretary in Coney Island when a policeman who was also an amateur photographer came across her, and they took a bunch of photos together, and it kind of gave Bettie the modeling bug. From there, eventually she met up with the Claw family. It was a brother and sister, Irving Claw, and Irving Claw basically introduced the world to a Bettie dressed in black lingerie and whips and crops. Pretty much her most iconic boudoir photography. And then from there, she met up with Bunny Yeager, who introduced the world to her leopard photos, the animal skin photos. They're pretty amazing. As well as eventually, she met up with Hugh Hefner, and she ended up posing for Playboy for a Christmas shoot where she's dressed as a sexy Santa, decorating a Christmas tree. Now, Hugh Hefner actually is interred not too far from where Bettie Page is, right about the center of your screen towards the back of this small cemetery. He's actually right next to Marilyn Monroe. We're going to talk about it a little bit later on, but towards the end of Bettie's life, after she found God and she kind of stepped away from the limelight, she ended up in a whole bunch of legal issues, and she ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Talk about it a little bit, like I said, but it's because of Hugh Hefner that pretty much allowed her to live comfortably for the rest of her life, and in fact even brought her out into the public eye again, even though at that time she was very self-conscious about the way that she looked. They did an event where she only allowed the magazine to photograph her hands. So there's this really cool photograph of her signing autographs. Those are her hands, but she wouldn't allow her face to be seen. Here's another photo from her funeral. Taken from right about here. You can see all the people gathered around. And with that, until next time, Bettie Mae Page, Queen of the Pinups. Thank you for everything. This place was not easy to find, but this building at 10540 Balboa Boulevard in Granada Hills is where Bettie Page's last known address was. It's called the Courtyard Apartments. With all my research, I can't pinpoint what apartment was Bettie Page's, but she definitely did live here. And it's a nice little courtyard. It is called the Courtyard Apartments. And there's a pool over here. Oh man, I just can't help imagining Bettie Page out here lounging by the pool in Southern California. Now the real question is this: how did the Queen of Pinups, Bettie Page, go from living in New York City to here in Southern California, where ultimately she died and her final resting place is? The story is pretty sad. Now here's the thing about Bettie. She absolutely loved what she was doing, taking pictures, the risque pictures. She felt very comfortable being nude, and to her it wasn't wrong, it was absolutely beautiful. But at the time, there was a lot of people out there who didn't agree with her and was pretty much out to tear her down, what they were doing. To put a timeline on all this, this is pretty much all happening right around the Irving Claw days. And the fight actually went to court, and it pretty much ruined Irving Claw's career. And she ended up moving from New York down to Florida, where she married again, and she also found God. And this is where things really started taking a major turn for the worse. These chain of events are a little crazy, but basically, Bettie's trouble with the law started at a church in Florida, where she held her husband at the time and his 2 kids at knife point in front of a portrait of Jesus, forcing them to pray. She got arrested and committed to a mental hospital. They got divorced, and then she got out and got her own place, but then she attacked her landlord with a knife. Got arrested again, back into a mental hospital. And then I do believe at that point is whenever she moved out here to California to be closer to, I think, her brother. But it didn't end there. Again, she got arrested for attacking her, I think it was her landlady or possibly a roommate, and really messed her up bad with a knife. I'm talking like I think she cut off her ear or part of her nose or something. And all that led to here. Just walking around the courtyard telling Bettie's story. During the time Bettie was having all these legal issues, she completely stepped away from the limelight. Nobody knew where she was. When she found God, she pretty much sold all of her handmade costumes, everything, anything that she had from her previous life as the queen of pinups. In fact, Penthouse magazine at one point even put out almost like a reward, if you will, for anybody who had any kind of information proving that Bettie Page was still alive. But like I said earlier at her gravesite, it was Hugh Hefner from Playboy that really let her know that she was a huge entertainment icon to the world, and let the rest of the world know that she was still alive. And with that being said, thank you for joining us on another Grimm adventure, this time telling the story of Bettie Page. Until next time, happy Halloween.
Wherever I come, bad luck just comes my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. A bad luck's always coming my way.